Okay. Right. Hi, Rachel. We're doing an interview with Rachel for the No Safety, No Work campaign that's been launched by a number of organizations and individuals. And today we're focusing on the issue of care workers, which is obviously one of the most difficult professions to be involved in at a time like this. So Rachel's going to talk to us a little bit about what it's like working in this area. So, Rachel, what exactly is the job that you do?
I work in a residential home for adults with learning disabilities and autism and complex needs. We have 4 residents at the moment. They all have their own little individual flats. My official title, which I always like, is Life Skills Instructor, which pretty much sums up what I do. I help them in all aspects of their daily living, and that includes cooking, shopping, bathing, toileting, washing, leisure activities, education activities, work activities, everything. Yeah.
And how many people are in the place and what age group?
4. We have 4, and they're all adults. And I think they're all in their 30s now, early 30s.
Okay. And obviously it's been difficult. So how has the COVID-19 affected your work? What changed?
Well, the job itself hasn't. I mean, we still do the same thing. It's affected my service users in that obviously all their day centres have closed down. And they have really struggled with that because being autistic, they need their structure and their routine. Also having learning disabilities, they don't entirely understand what's going on, although we do try and explain it to them. They don't understand why they're suddenly not being able to go to McDonald's and have their meal out on a Thursday, and why they're not able to go to their day centre Monday to Wednesday, or as they call it, college. Do you know what I mean? And suddenly their routine is disrupted. And because they don't understand that, they get very upset. And when they get upset, we can have challenges. I don't know if I can talk about sort of challenging behaviour, but we do get some behaviours because that's how they show their emotion. And so it's been very hard for them. And it has meant that we have had, as staff, have had to try and provide that in-house, those activities. But at the same time, we also then obviously have to try and follow government guidelines. So we have to wear masks, which in itself has created problems because, again, our service users, because some of them are non-verbal, they rely on facial expression. So when you want to say, oh, everything's good, go, yeah, everything's great, and you'll smile, thumbs up, But with a mask on, of course, that's covered. Yeah. So you're doing that, but they can't see your expression to see that everything's okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Also, they find verbal interaction quite hard, so they're often looking at your mouth to see what you're saying. So that's a challenge. Social distancing. It's almost, if you're doing personal care, if you're helping someone to have a bath, if you're helping someone to clean themselves after they've been to the toilet, you can't social distance.
Yeah.
So that obviously is also a big thing. So we working with full aprons, gloves, mask, visor, foot protector, very hot as well into summer.
Yeah.
And it's very impersonal as well for the guys. Our company have been amazing in that our managers have been fantastic. I'm very fortunate in where I work. We are one of the few care organisations that really have cared about its staff. I've worked for ones that really haven't. I'm very, 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 very lucky in this. And my managers have, even before we got the special fluid repellent ones, sewed up masks for us and spent time doing that for us. Do you know what I mean? And have really pushed the PPE, a lot of really, really good support for us. Now, I travel on public transport to get to work. I catch 2 buses. And so what I have to do is I have an outfit to travel in and I have a mask to travel in. And when I get to work, I then have to change, put on my work clothes. I put on a different mask. I work with one service user. I get changed again, put on another mask to work with another service user. I then have to get changed again, put on another mask to travel home.
I was just wondering, so you haven't felt unsafe
No,
in your job?
not really.
And obviously the service users, they haven't felt unsafe because everyone else is looking after them to make sure they are safe.
Yeah.
But, so it seems to me that the transport potentially, I guess, is unsafe.
Yeah.
But I suppose it just adds huge amount of effort to the job.
It does. Yeah, it really, really, really does. And I know that in other places are not so lucky. They've not been provided with PPE. I have colleagues who don't work in the same place as me, but people I know in the industry who have actually had COVID patient, and they've not been provided. They've not even been provided with gloves, let alone masks. I mean, I know for myself, I've not been tested for COVID. None of the staff have been tested. One of our service users was symptomatic, and we managed to get her tested, but it was a massive effort on my manager's part and a massive struggle. She really had to push, but none of the staff were tested who were working with her. And from what I know, I don't know anyone who works in this industry who's been tested for COVID, even when they've had COVID patients.
I thought they were meant to supposedly test all care workers, but even in your place of work, which is much better than many others, you haven't been tested.
I've not been tested.
So have they tried to get tests, and it's just a question that they're not about? What is the problem with the testing?
We get a bulletin every day on our email at work. We also get an email from our on-site managers, and I've heard nothing about us being tested at all. And I think it's probably got to do with cost.
Of the place you work for?
Yeah.
Because they would have to pay for the test rather than the government.
I don't know how these things work, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But that would be my guess, is it's cost. The test costs money. And I think that there are other priorities. So people like nurses, doctors, people who are working in the hospitals, they will take priority over care workers.
So you haven't felt unsafe, and you've explained quite a lot about the measures that they took to make people feel safe. It's just that they really make working quite difficult. Have they ever talked about offering a pay increase for these extra work you have to do?
Again, you see, I feel very lucky. I do, because I actually got a bonus because we had a symptomatic service user. We got a £150 bonus. But again, I have spoken to colleagues who have had to shield for 2 weeks and they haven't been paid. They haven't even got statutory sick pay. The organisation has refused to pay them. Again, I am one of the lucky ones. My organisation is exceptional in that regard.
So in other places, this isn't happening from the people
it's not happening
that you
at all. Most care organisations won't even pay their staff overtime rate, because most of the time, if you do overtime, you get like time and a half, double time. If you work weekends, bank holidays, you usually get a special rate. Not in care. And in fact, I know of colleagues who, are paid minimum wage, and even through this, not being paid any extra. And some people have even been expected to buy their own PPE, buy their own gloves, buy their own masks. There is an argument that, the social care sector is being squeezed massively. The social, these organisations are not getting the money they need to do the job that they're supposed to be doing from the government. And then that is then being passed down to the staff. Or it could be that they are getting the money that they need and it's being pocketed.
Most care homes or care organisations are private now, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, you do see, I know in my last organisation, the big wig managers would kind of pull up in their Mercedes while we were paid minimum wage. And I think they do get a fair whack to run these organisations. But what happens to that money, I don't know.
So I suppose our question for the campaign is obviously they want to try to campaign to improve things, and it is partially a question of the safety, but it's also a question of, I think, the general working conditions as well and what people have to put up with. So if you were going to make recommendations, what do you think people should be able to have as a right? And what changes would you like to see made?
They should have a living wage. We should be paid for the work we do, and it needs to be recognised as skilled, highly skilled work. We should be there with nurses, doctors, all of those so-called professionals. We are professionals too.
I would have thought more than a living wage, to tell you the truth.
To be honest with you, yeah, absolutely. It's something that I have fought for a long time, that we need to be recognised. We are not recognised. We are often forgotten about. We're very rarely mentioned. When they talk about health and social care, you will hear about the social workers, you will hear about the nurses, you will hear about the doctors. You never hear about the care workers. You never hear about the healthcare assistants. You don't hear about the cleaners, the caretakers. You know, we're the people who actually keep these places running. We're the ones that wipe the bums, change the beds, clean the floors, talk to the patients. We're the ones that actually do the care. We might not be giving the injections and doing the surgeries, but we're doing the work that everything else is built on. Also, we need to be given the equipment and the ability to do our jobs properly. So in a situation like this, we need to have access to full PPE. I'm lucky. I was given that, but not everybody was. And we also need to be given the training and the time to train. And that is something that is not often given. I'm expected, for example, to do my training in my own time, but they won't let me do it at home. If I do it at home, I won't get paid for it. So we need to be given the training and the time, paid time, to do that training.
So nothing, you wouldn't say much has changed then, since COVID hasn't actually made it possible to get some changes, do you think, because they think they're valuing care workers more?
No, I don't think so. I think it's going to go back to the way it was. I think there was a little surge, but it was all about nurses and doctors. It was about the NHS. And most care workers don't work for the NHS. Again, we were overlooked. So, no, I think it'll just go back to the way it was.
And what happens if there's another spike? Well, another wave, which I think most people are actually saying there will be one at some point. Then how do you feel about going?
We haven't broken lockdown. In our place, our service users haven't gone back to day centres. We are still continuing to abide by lockdown, and that's come from management. And management are going to keep that up for as long as they can, because we all believe that there will be a second spike. So we don't want to put our service users back into that their old routine, only to break that routine again. So we're keeping up what we've been doing since March, and keeping those service users in the same. We've managed to build. We've got them used to now a routine, and we do things with them each day. And staff have voluntarily agreed to abide by lockdown. So I'm still isolating.
So is there any other changes that you think that we should be campaigning for in some way? And do people have any rights at all, or is it just really hard to get even basic rights in the industry?
Yeah. I mean, in my last organisation, I was union rep, and my last organisation was a really appalling employer. When minimum wage went up, they refused to put us up to that wage. And it used to be that there was a tiered system, so that you'd start on a particular wage, and then you would get increments as you either gained in qualifications or for how long you'd been there, that kind of thing. And what they did was, when the minimum wage went up, is they then banged everybody on the same pay scale. But that meant for some of us, we actually took a pay cut. And so I was already part of a union, and I had a couple of colleagues who was part of Unison. And so we got the union involved, and we campaigned to get a pay rise. And we managed it. We did it. It took us about a year and a half. And we did. We got a pay rise out of the organisation. And we did that by doing work to rule. So we refused to do overtime. We refused to stay on. We wouldn't do anything over and above exactly what our job description said. And we were in constant negotiation. The union negotiated for us with management And eventually we got a pay rise. There was talk about going on strike, but that was very difficult to get people to do that because they were understandably scared, because basically the organisation said, well, if you go on strike, we won't pay you, obviously. And so people were scared for their livelihoods. And unfortunately, it wasn't clear about what or if there would be any help coming in regards to, if you did go on strike, how would you survive financially? Do you know what I mean? That wasn't made clear to us at all.
So what's the potential now, though? I mean, would you say that it's harder for people to act now during the pandemic?
I'd say I mean the other thing was then is that people would say, and this was a common argument, in care, and something that often happens is they'll say, well, what about the service users? I can't go on strike because of my service users. Who's going to look after the guys? I've got a duty of care. For myself, I'm like, well, no, so that's up to social services, mate. If they don't want us to go on strike, they should pay us properly, and they should have all these things in place. I'm quite sort of hard line about that. And I'm like, yeah, I get where you're coming from. But at the end of the day, you've also got to look at your own working conditions and pay. Do you know what I mean? So I would face the same kind of difficulties as I did in my previous organisation. Also, because where I work has been so good. People say, yeah, but they've done this, that and the other. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't want to try, but I think I would struggle to get people on side.
You don't see the chances of things changing anytime soon?
I don't know. I've been in this industry for nearly 30 years. It hasn't changed. I've fought to be recognised. I've tried to do it on my own. I've tried to do it through a union. I've tried to get people on side, and people will agree with you. But when it actually then comes to actually doing something and taking action, oh no, I can't. I can't afford to not be on at work. And what about you'll get? Do you know what? So it's really hard to motivate folks.
Well, do you think there's anything that people from outside could do to support? I know it's quite hard.
I think what you'd need to do is be able to reassure people about money, because that's going to be the big biggie, and looking after the service users that would be looked after and cared for. And they'll be your two major points. How am I going to survive if I don't go into work, if I say go on strike? And who is going to look after my service users if I'm not there?
Well, do you think there's any scope for, because that's the problem, if the people that are working there can't go on strike, and you do have to consider the service users. What about, we have talked about in the campaign doing some kind of whistleblowing. So I wasn't sure whether if there was a care home that was particularly bad, if there was a way of getting that care home bad publicity, so that way the people who work there wouldn't have to go on strike. There'd be no way of showing who was involved with it. I was just wondering if that kind of campaign could be quite useful if certain employers were shown publicly to be really not looking after their staff.
You could almost say then, I suppose, couldn't you? You could put it almost as a safeguarding, I suppose. If it could be shown that through their actions, that the service users and staff were at risk of COVID because they weren't providing proper PPE, they weren't providing proper hand washing facilities, hand sanitizing facilities, proper training to their staff, then that could, I guess, go to something like CQC, and it could be done as a safeguarding.
All right, so that's great, Rachel. Mike, did you want to talk at all?
I work in what they call the third sector, which is sometimes known as the voluntary sector, and social enterprises and community groups. So we're in a slightly different situation, where, if you like, the people that Rachel's service users would go to, so like the community centres and that, so they're all shut. So most of the people I know, including ourselves, are either working from home or on furlough. Some are on furlough. The biggest impact for us has been a massive increase in clients and in their needs, because we don't do any face-to-face visits now at all. So everything's done over the phone. And we have a lot of people with mental health who find it really difficult to isolate. And we work quite closely with the Trussell Trust food banks. We've found, speaking to them, they had a dip round about April and May where it really dropped off at food banks. They were down to about 5-10% of their usual amount. And then I spoke to the head of Leeds Food Banks last week, and over the last 3 months, it's now increased to 300% of what they normally had. So it's gone very weird. It's taken a right dip and then a right. And we're seeing the same thing. We had that gap in the middle where we were too busy, which meant we managed to get on with a lot of other stuff, which we haven't usually done. But now, I mean, this last sort of month, we've spent nearly every day with contacting clients, and having hour-long talks with clients who are in complete panics. So we help them with benefits stuff, for instance. And this has all been done over the phone now. And it's quite difficult to do appeals and forms and everything over the phone. And we're seeing, initially, we saw an increase in successful cases, but now we're seeing a massive increase in unsuccessful cases. So it was almost like at the beginning they went, oh, we'll let people get away with stuff. And now they're really tightening down, which has made it very difficult. Safety-wise, it's not an issue for us because we just don't meet people. But I'm lucky as well because I help run the charity. There's only really myself and a colleague, and we're both the equivalent of managers and project workers. So we do everything anyway. So we've been lucky in that sense. So if we'd have had to stop working full stop, we'd have still got paid. But I do know people who work for other organisations that I won't name that have not been paid when they've had to take time off. And it's difficult because I think the problem is in social care as a whole is if you do whistleblow, the only thing people are really interested in is if service users are being abused. And you can see that by the programmes about it. Any form of whistleblowing about the way staff are treated is either brushed under the carpet or those people are got rid of. I was a union organiser and we could not get people organised into unions, even within our organisation. Out of the 10 staff we had at the height, when we were well funded, we had 4 in the union. They all wanted to join when they were being made redundant, but that was a different matter. Yeah. But, and it's considered a relatively left-wing sort of profession generally. But people just won't do it. And people are scared about the jobs. And I think things are going to get worse.
The people that you deal with, are some of them being forced back to work then because they're not getting what they need in terms of...
We've been quite lucky. 90% of our clients don't work. They're just not capable of working. What we have found where the people are being forced back into work is carers. So people who were originally allowed to go off because their partners were shielding and were in the extreme vulnerable categories are now being forced back to work. Or, well, they don't need to shield anymore, so you can come into work. And we are finding that. So I got contacted by one of my clients. Her husband's the disabled person, but I always deal with her because he won't speak at all. He's got severe mental health and physical problems and breathing problems. And she's just been forced to go back to work for ASDA, who've basically said, you can't have any more time off. And she was asking me what she should do. And it's a difficult question to answer because automatically what you want to say is, well, to protect yourself and him, don't go back to work. But then she's out of a job. And what we're finding is it's unclear. The department refuses to answer us about whether if someone refuses to go back to work, whether they can claim benefits.
You said that they were becoming more difficult. At the beginning, they were willing to pay people.
Yeah.
And now they're becoming more difficult and they're trying to avoid paying.
Oh, definitely. They're back to the way they were before it. We had a couple of clients. One's got mental health, one's got alcohol and drug problems. And they both had phone interviews, what they call assessments. And we told them that these would not work. We said they will just answer yes to everything. And they did. And they've basically said, oh, well, we rang them and they were fine. And it's like, yeah, we told you that. So now we're having to appeal it, which takes time and effort, etc., and puts them in a difficult place as well. Whereas before, what they were doing was with people like that at the very beginning of this, they were letting the assessment slide and just carrying on the money to these people who are already getting it, but have to reapply after every year, particularly for personal independence payment and universal credit. And now they're just basically doing these ridiculous phone assessments. I mean, you can imagine it. You can't get clients to be forthcoming face to face. A phone assessment, there's no way. So the classic example is what they get asked is, can you do things like get dressed? And the answer is yes. But that's not the actual rules. The rules are, how do you get dressed? What do you do? Are you breathless? Are you tired? Are you in pain? And they don't ask that. So therefore, get dressed, fine, no benefit. And
so that means these people then are basically losing their benefits then?
Yes.
And what do they expect them to do?
Well, I mean, the ones that we're supporting were obviously appealing. So last week I did 7 appeals. To give you an example, around about the same amount of clients that I have last year, I did 8 appeals for the whole year. So 7 appeals in a couple of months. That's a lot.
So at the beginning of the pandemic, they're spending money, and now it seems that they're even trying to force the most vulnerable people back to work.
Yes. And I think it's part of the thing of when it hit and when it was really bad at the beginning, I think they had to spend money. They were forced into it. We know that from government announcements. And then as they've managed to go, well, we've beaten it now, which is the general attitude, they've just clamped down on everything. And we know that from the announcement that nurses aren't going to get a pay rise, and certainly nobody else is. And I do think there is now a concerted attack on the most vulnerable, the increased anxieties and difficulties that they're having. Because, I mean, like one of my clients, he's had a letter this week to say it's all okay now, he doesn't have to shield anymore. And he's got COPD and breathing problems. And he said, what do you think? I said, ignore that. You carry on shielding.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's nobody cares anymore. I think as a campaign for what we're doing, that we should, whistleblowing's difficult. I think it should be encouraged, but I think it's difficult. I think in the end, we may need to concentrate on an industry that we can really get to grips with, which at the moment, I think, because of the other hot topics around it, could be education.
Well, because teachers and people working in education have also been in a stronger position before. But it's very tragic that the kind of work that you and Rachel are doing and the people you're looking after and the job that Rachel has done is just so undervalued and so hard to actually improve the situation. And
it's unfortunate because you're in this weird situation that the only people who do our type of work are people who care about the people they're dealing with, looking after. And therefore, they're the easiest to abuse because they won't take the action because they're worried about the service users and the clients. I had the same as Rachel when we were taking pay cuts. I didn't blame our management committee because they were forced into it by the council. But there was a mass protest. This was back in early 2000, and strikes going on within the voluntary sector against the council. And in the end, it was our management committee who shut us down because the staff wouldn't take action. There was only me and my boss, Kath, and one of the others who wanted to take action. And we spoke to the management committee and they said, right, we'll force the issue. We agree with you. We're shutting it down until we get our funding back. And that was good of them. But the rest of the staff were like, oh no, but what about the clients? What are they going to do?
I suppose that's why we have to look at the solidarity action maybe on the part of workers who are in a stronger position.
Yes. I think that
everyone in their own sector, and then you've got these very precarious sectors, and they're often left, whereas the stronger sectors then can organise more effectively.
And I think that if you have a victory, you can go and say to the precarious workers, look, this is what happened. if you're strong and organised. And I think that was exceptionally good what they did. I think it was mainly London, wasn't it? The London Cleaners. They took a group of London Cleaners, won, and suddenly lots of London Cleaners were going, hold on, we can win. And that's the way to do it. At the moment, our industry doesn't see it. But if they see it in something like teachers or education staff, then maybe they'll see it in others.